Kia ora Anna. Just to let you know, we're changing the format. You're more than welcome to have your camera and microphone on. We'll do this as a round table. I think Gina said that in the message a couple of days ago. So thanks so much for being here. Kia ora koutou and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for this important and timely kōrero about immigration and how it intersects with Aotearoa's fast-growing game development industry. I know that for many of our studios, immigration plays a critical role in building strong teams, bringing in global experience and helping us scale our games for international success. But we also know that there are challenges from understanding visa pathways to navigating processing times and skill classifications. Today is a chance to dig into those challenges and opportunities and to hear directly from those who are shaping and supporting the system. My name is Joy Keane. I'm the Executive Director of the New Zealand Game Developers Association, and I'm joined by Brendon Gardiner, Sector Relationship Manager for Digital and Technology, and Craig Chambers, Business Advisor in the Operational Policy Team. Both work for MB in the immigration sector. Both bring deep experience working alongside tech and creative sectors, and we're incredibly grateful to have them with us today. As I said before, today's session is being run as a virtual roundtable, which means it's intended to be collaborative and open discussion. While we'll kick off with some insights from our guests at Immigration New Zealand, we really encourage you to share your experiences, raise questions, and highlight any challenges or ideas you think are important. And as I said before, if you wish to, please feel free to have your camera on and your microphone at the ready. We'll start with a short overview of that's a weird word to say. We'll start with a short overview from Brendon and Craig, followed by some Q&A and input from you. So to get started, I'll hand to Brendon.
Cool, thank you. Kia ora koutou. Good morning, everyone, and thanks very much for joining us. And for those who may be watching the recording later, and I'll probably just put a wee disclaimer for anyone watching later. If we do cover any depths of policy, this was recorded on the 11th of June, so always wise just to check back later for those sorts of things. So yeah, I'm an engagement partner with MB based in our Tauranga office, but working with sectors around the country, and been with MB for about 10 or 11 years. Prior to this particular role, I also have a background in migrant settlement and attraction and in careers as well. So that's a little bit about me in terms of my role. And I guess during today, again, feel free to jump in with questions at any stage, whether it's in the chat or whether it's coming on the microphone and camera later. So it's good to see some faces on and acknowledging it sounds like there's a camera issue in the mix for someone. And I'll now hand over to my colleague Craig Chambers to introduce himself and to open the session.
Sure. Thanks, Brendon. Kia ora, everyone. My name's, as Brendon said, Craig Chambers. I'm what you know in immigration as a lifer. I've been around here just celebrated my 25th year in the business. Got a nice little silver medal to celebrate that. My background has been in the operational policy space for about the last 10 years or so, but I'm currently working with Brendon in the engagement space just to get some experience of how we work with the guys at the front line, and I'm picking up heaps and heaps of useful information to do that. What we thought we might do today is, as Brendon said, primarily run a Q&A session. But here are some of the topics we've had a bit of a brainstorm and figured out that you guys might be interested in some of this sort of stuff. So we're pretty much like covering, looking at temporary entry pathways, looking at residence pathways, looking at attraction and retention strategies, and then also dipping into like current processing times before we're moving into the Q&A session. What Brendon is going to do actually now, we thought we might quickly get the processing stuff out of the way. Brendon's going to actually jump onto a few websites and give you some advice on that. So I'll just pass back to you, Brendon, if that's all right. I'll just stop sharing now.
Excellent, thanks, Craig. So if I can do this, I will just click a different button here. If I do this well, what we normally were going to do is if we'd gone through the slides, we would have done this at the end, as Craig mentioned. But if I can do this. One of the things we like to do in the session is, as well as discuss the topics with you, is show you where you can find some of this information after the session. We can potentially cover a lot of ground and things can change, and especially things like processing times. So after the session, where do you get the most up-to-date information for that? So hopefully, if I've done this right, you can now see a Google page around INZ processing times. Looking for any nods from Craig or from Joy. Yep. So one of the things, whether it's for yourself or for staff you're looking at, one of the questions we often get in immigration is how long does it take? And that can be that you've actually got someone in the system and you're wondering how long is this going to take someone to get through, or you're planning your recruitment and you're wondering, well, if I bring a migrant in, how long is this going to take me? Or maybe a perfect candidate's walked through in the door on a working holiday visa, which is ideal as well. And you're thinking, how long does this take to look at some different options? So our website has gone through a very brand new structure in the last 3 or 4 weeks. I am using Google here, and I've literally just checked INZ processing times. And while student visas are first, if you do have a look at how long it takes to process an application, and there are some notes at the top where if you do see those, if someone has got something in the system at the moment, there is a tech issue to be aware of. Parent Boost was just announced at the weekend, so you will sometimes encounter some of these topical things. But what we're aiming to do across a range of categories about every week, almost every week, this data is updated to give you an idea of what's happening in the system at the moment, because as some of you'll be aware from headlines, processing times can vary a wee bit. So as some examples here, everything from visitor visa, student visa, work visa, and residence visa times are all available here. Now, if there's set questions later, I can look at any of these, but I will just have a look at the accredited employer work visa is one of the main work visa types. It is far from the only one. But what I will just show you, you can be aware of is, if you were wanting to become, say, an accredited employer, how long is it taking on average at the moment to get accredited? Average wait time 2 days for about 50%. Most completed within 2 weeks. I'll get back to that time difference shortly. We have broken down, say, so for an accredited employer work visa, there are 3 steps: the employer becoming accredited, a job check being done, and the work visa going through. For other visa categories, there isn't necessarily those 3 steps. But again, you could plan and say for a job check, you can see all these details on here. How long does this take? On average, getting a job check between 2 days and 3 days, but could be a week to 2 weeks for most. And if we were to look further down, the actual work visa itself, if I can pick this out well, the actual work visa itself for most ICT sector roles is a broad headline, 50% within 3 weeks, most within 4 weeks. So one of the questions that we sometimes get around processing, and something that our visa operations team are always keen for us to raise, is people say, well, why are some 2 days and why are some 2 weeks? So very generally speaking, ordinarily, the biggest weight in the system will be for your application to get in front of an immigration officer, depending on how many others are in the queue in front of it. If when they receive your application, it's got everything it needs, it's all there, they've got everything they need to make a good decision, that can be done quite quick. If an application either has a few more details to work through, or they have to write back to you for something else, maybe that's why it takes a little bit longer. So it can be around complete applications, or it can be that there's something else they've had to query on an application. But just in general, this gives you an idea. How long is this taking at the moment? If we've said the average processing time for a visa is 3 or 4 weeks, and you're sitting there at 6 weeks thinking, why haven't I heard anything? It's always a good idea to check in with our contact centre just to make sure that nothing else has happened. And something we normally do a little bit at the end, but I will cover a little bit now, is just who can give immigration advice. So part of the job of Craig and I of running these sessions is hopefully we make the system sound a lot easier to navigate. But at any stage, if you wanted to get advice from an independent third party, we're just covering who can do that. So I have Googled who can give immigration advice, but the website is iaa.govt.nz. So it is the Immigration Advisors Authority. They're separate to us. So again, anyone, an employer, an individual, can do their application themselves. That's fine, and that's great if that's your choice to do so. Anyone can give information as well. So I don't want to make it sound like only, it's hard to talk about immigration. Anyone can share the slides from today. Anyone can share links. It's fine to be sharing information. But some of this intent is around if you're getting advice that you're potentially paying for around something as significant as residence in another country for a whole family, that actually the person giving that advice knows the basis they're doing it on. So okay, anyone can share immigration information, that's fine. If you're getting to advice, and especially if someone's charging money for it, you can seek independent advice from any of these options. Any licensed immigration advisor, any New Zealand registered lawyer, Immigration New Zealand, or Citizens Advice Bureau, community law, or the office of any New Zealand Member of Parliament is also covered. So some of those cost money, some of those are free. The reason I'm showing you this website is if you were just thinking about using an immigration advisor, this is a way that you can actually check to say, if someone tells you they're a licensed immigration advisor, I'm not a licensed immigration advisor, so if you were to check this website and search for me, you'll find I'm not there. But it's a check for you that you've got to go, okay, if someone's saying I can give you immigration advice, what happens there? So just really two websites to be aware of, our processing times and who can give immigration advice. So I think that was really a starter for me. Now I will just see where I can go to stop share at this stage. I think it's now really going to have a look at some of our questions and any questions that you may have as well. So if I hand back to Joy.
Yeah, thanks, Brendon. We do have a few questions that have been asked by people who registered for the session. The first one is about somebody immigrating to New Zealand, and I'm wondering if that person who is in the meeting would actually like to ask the question. Go for your life, Ayla. Yeah.
Oh, was it me? I actually don't remember my question.
No problem.
What was it?
What it was is I'm immigrating and want to bring my development studio with me. What should I know about business in New Zealand and transferring a business to New Zealand?
Right. Yeah. I have a video game development studio now that's registered in California, but we are working with an immigration service working in, we actually applied for our working holiday visas yesterday. They went through finally. So hopefully we're told between 2 to 4 days, up to 2 weeks before we hear back. But obviously once I get there, I plan on a path to residency through teaching. But I do want to move my business also at the same time. And yeah, I'm just wondering what I should know, what that process looks like. I'm not much of a business person, especially in another country.
Alrighty, so I'll make a bit of a start, and if I screen share, I've just realised one of the links that I had to put up there, I'm just going to quickly do in the interim. No, it's great that you're looking at moving to New Zealand, so looking forward to you moving down here. There's probably a couple of, depending on the aspects of your business you're looking at, I'd looked at this beforehand and thought there was a couple of websites and agencies to probably draw your attention to and then see where the conversation took us. So where is my share screen link that I've managed to lose somewhere? There we go. If I share, I think there's be a couple of websites that would be good ones to have a look at, because the New Zealand government has got business.govt.nz, which hopefully is on the screen now, in terms of it's probably one starting point for, I don't know if you may or may not have seen this one already, but it does give a bit of a guide to, it's a starting point with different links for guide to starting a business in terms of exporting from New Zealand, with different things to be aware of. Hopefully along here, he says, yeah, there's things like an employment agreement and builder. So it's a bit of an introduction to things like the employment law. All of these things will have their own websites or different areas, but it's quite a good 101 place to go to as one of the starting points for, who is the tax agency in New Zealand. It's Inland Revenue. How do you get or use a New Zealand business number, registering a company in New Zealand?
Is there a specific type of visa I have to have, or one that I'm not allowed to have before I can start a business or move a business over?
Now, if I start, and I'll check Craig if you want to jump in on this as well. Different visas will have different rights around self-employment. I'm not 100% sure on business ownership, but I know there will be some visas that may have a limitation on being self-employed. Some do, some don't. So it will depend a bit on that. I'm just looking at Craig coming off microphone and checking about business ownership.
Yep, sure, no problem. Generally, most work visas in New Zealand, for example, the one you're coming out on, the working holiday scheme, are pretty much like, has to be based on like an employer-employee relationship. So therefore, you're not really in a position to be self-employed on that visa, as in like run your own business sort of thing. But and also you mentioned that you were going to go down that, well, you drop down the teaching pathway, which I assume for residents. So, but once you become a resident, you're able to do basically, you're a New Zealand resident or citizen, you can pretty much do anything you want to. But we do have some visas available for people that do, for example, like in the entrepreneurial space, that if their main intent is actually to come to New Zealand, either buy into an existing business or bring a business from their home country into New Zealand, that would be the pathway to go. But it's quite a sort of like specific sort of pathway. So people, yeah, either they're, for example, coming down the skilled route where they're looking to have that employer-employee relationship, or otherwise, if their main intent is actually to come here and with a be an entrepreneur, start up a business, buy into an existing business to grow that business within New Zealand. That's basically the two sort of like pathways that you can take, sort of thing. And all that information is, I'm going to say this 300 times, it's probably just all that information actually is available on our website. So all we just need to do is look for like just search under an entrepreneur, and there is like a work visa pathway which can take you right through into residence if that's what you want to do. I hope that
Okay,
answered your
thank
question.
you.
Yeah.
I think the teaching pathways is probably the quickest way to go. So that's the goal number one. But if it doesn't work out for some reason, I do want to be knowledgeable about other pathways. Yeah.
Sure, no
Yeah.
problem. Cool.
Yes, I think entrepreneur is there, and I did. If this shows up, yeah, it's one example. And I think one of the things for the visa system is always to think, as you've identified, there are lots of potential different pathways. So it's seeing what works best for you at any stage with that. But yeah, there are a range of different options. And I think the other one I had looked at on one of the questions that I think was pre-submitted as well, is I think there was talk about sort of support for businesses. In addition as well, the other agency, and it is mentioned on business.govt.nz, was New Zealand Trade and Enterprise as well. So as well as associations within the industry, such as the Game Development Association, you have also from a government perspective, there is also New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, who's got a number of arms that, potentially help with navigating the New Zealand business environment, particularly with exporting, if anything as well, support offshore, even potentially what some of the things like navigating tariffs in any overseas environment might look like. They're just looking at the banner headline that they've got there as well. So hopefully that's what's showing on the screen at the moment.
I think we've lost your screen share at some stage.
Oh, have I?
Brendon,
I will stop and restart. Let's see if we do it. We're still showing a sharing for me, which is a trap there. Hopefully you are now seeing the New Zealand Trade and Enterprise website.
yes.
Okay, so that was the other, it's another option for in terms of just the New Zealand business environment, and there's a lot of great resources available, whether it's from government, whether it's from industry associations. Hopefully, there's a lot of different sources out there.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Brendon. I've got another couple of questions that were submitted ahead of the webinar, so we'll get those through to you. The first one here is, which is the harder issue to address for New Zealand's game economy? Access to overseas talent to bring here, or retention of talent that is already here in New Zealand? And how might we address those issues? So it's quite a complex question to answer. I'll just kick off from the industry point of view, and then I'll hand over to Brendon and Craig, whichever one would like to tackle this question. So the industry report that we put out at the beginning of this year, reflecting on the 2024 year, showed us that skill shortages are one of the biggest problems facing the games industry, and that the most significant shortages are in programming. So about 31% of all the jobs that we're trying to fill at the moment are actually programming. And also at the other end, creative roles like 2D, 3D art, 9%, which is still quite a significant amount. We also know that about 14% of new hires are coming from overseas, and we've got another 11% coming out of our tertiary providers, which is also quite significant numbers. But the problem with those numbers is they don't reflect the total need of the industry, and that need is still greater than what we're getting. It is very hard to find the right person at the right time. And yes, there is definitely a problem with locally grown talent going overseas because of the better financial outcomes that people can have. So the answer is simply from the industry association's point of view, both are as much of a problem as each other. But Brendon, Craig, do you have any comments there that we could add to this?
And I think reflecting your comments, both are very important. It's from a past role that I had around migrant settlement, looking at attraction is important. It's always between industry, government, looking at the settings around education or immigration. How are we attracting people? Have we got the settings right? How are things working? It is talent is in demand around the world, so people do have good choices. So it's making sure that we're an attractive destination and making the most of what we have. I think there is certainly, for talking to different industries there from New Zealand, there is often that pull of Australia, but it is about finding people where the fit with New Zealand around, be it the lifestyle, the finances, and the family situation works really well. I think from a retention point of view, especially for new migrants, it's always really important to keep in mind settling in a new country can take about 18 months to 2 years to really feel like someone's settled in. So, there is often a bit of a roller coaster the first few weeks, especially if you arrive in summer. It's all magic. You might have left in northern winter. This is pretty cool, barbecue at Christmas, depending on the climate you've come from. But it is a bit of a journey as people set in, different, maybe setbacks with different things around realizing just how far it is from home. That thing around retention is always something to work on, and it's as well as one of I think the challenges for all of us, because settlement, it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a village to settle a migrant family. I think when we're looking at retention, it's both what happens in the workplace and outside. So, anything that employers can do or we can do as individuals to help families settle also helps with retention, because depending on one of the questions that comes up later, I did even see an article on Stuff over the weekend that was talking about, a family that had lived in 3 different places, including Australia, that had picked New Zealand and why. And it is that balance of all the factors. It was how it fitted for both partners, for the financial situation and what they were looking for at that stage of life. So I think it's always working on everything from how do we connect around the skills we need to, okay, now we've got them here. And we are mindful of retention point of view. I live in Tauranga, there's a great beach down the road, but if you go to Sydney, there's a great beach at Bondi. So it's recognising we've got some lifestyle factors, but between us all maximising what we offer to migrants moving to New Zealand.
That's a great segue, Brendon, into the next question, which is asking if there are any government subsidies or support entities to help companies based in other countries establish satellite offices within New Zealand. And we are, as an industry association, we are actually seeing more and more people look to bring their businesses to New Zealand and establish satellite offices. So you're aware of any subsidies or support that could be available to them?
I think myself, and I'll look to Craig as well, I'm not directly, but I think it'll be more NZ Trade and Enterprise that I mentioned before. They would probably be the ones to have a look at. I'm not aware of direct subsidies, but certainly support, possibly subsidies. I don't want to rule that out because they may have some things that I'm not aware of, but it will be looking across those agencies. But I'm not aware of anything directly in MB unless you are, Craig. I suspect we're not.
Yes, unfortunately, same. Beyond what I know about the film industry itself offers subsidies to big production companies to come out here and film, or obviously use local people in their films and that. Yeah, beyond that, sorry, I don't really have any other knowledge.
And I think there are, depending on the industry in the area, there may be some of those options. We've got industry associations like the Gaming Development Association, as well as Trade and Enterprise. Also within different regions, there are economic development agencies that may have, I'm familiar with Priority One here in Tauranga. There's Auckland Unlimited in Auckland, and every other region has got one. So to be fair to them, I could name 16 or 17. there may not always be subsidies, but there will be a lot of support to help people set up and to connect to the local business environment and to make some of those connections. There's also Export New Zealand as well for those that might be looking at, okay, they're moving to New Zealand, but their clients will be offshore. There's a lot of potential support. It would certainly be, if it's not dollar related, it would certainly help with setting up for your earning potential.
Absolutely. And NZTE are one of our partners, so we're quite happy to help people by introducing them to the business development managers at NZTE and getting support that way. And of course, there's always the game development community who's always here to support anybody new, and we can help facilitate those discussions as well. Just before I move on to some of the additional questions that we have, is there anything that any of you currently sitting in on the call would like to ask? Please feel free to.
I suppose I have another question. So I'll be getting there with the working holiday visa hopefully next month. And I know I can work on that visa. I guess I don't quite understand how that process works, how difficult it is for the employer. I assume it'll be easier since I am in the country. But can I just walk up anywhere and apply, or what? I guess what's the process there?
I'll take this, Brendon. Yeah, pretty much in short, you've nailed it. It's yeah, you've essentially got like what is known as like an open work visa, so that which means you can, as long as you're not being running your own business or being self-employed, you can basically work for anyone in New Zealand. So you can pretty much just like apply through job websites. Like in New Zealand, we've got like Seek and Trade Me and things like that. So there's nothing to stop you from literally walking in someone's front door and asking for a job. Yeah. So that's
fantastic.
Yeah. And the employer doesn't really
you.
need to do anything else, because they should be asking to see what visa, ask you what kind of visa you have, and you'll be able to show them, or you've probably got some evidence of that, and say, hey, I've got a 12-month. Is it 12 months? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, 12-month working holiday scheme visa. Yeah.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Thank you so much.
I'm just wondering, and this might sound like a bit of a rude question, but whether some of the processing time differences can depend on just who you get at the other end. I know, for example, with MSD and so on, how much help you get and support you get can depend on which caseworker you land with. Is it very like, are the pipelines very specific and rule oriented, or is there a certain amount of leeway that case managers have?
If I start, Craig, and you may want to add to it. I mean, I think there are rules that they have to follow. So, for each category, you've got to meet certain criteria. There may be elements of discretion around some of it as well. So, I mean, I think it will depend on both the category and, someone with a straightforward history, whereas if someone has travelled to potentially a number of different countries around the world that may have different risk factors with it, that may take longer to assess. It really just depends on the application and some of the things in their background as well. But it's, in very general terms as well, residency would take longer to assess than a temporary work visa as well, just with, generally speaking, the longer in New Zealand, the more things like health may have to be assessed as well. So those can just add extra things to it. So it's a range of factors. The immigration officers have got an operations manual and a range of guidance that they have to do. So we do actually publish the operations manual, so that, if you were to Google INZ operations manual, you can actually see a large part of what an immigration officer has to work through. It's not the entirety of it, but it is a large part of it. So yeah, they're working through that, but there will be aspects they have some potential discretion around as well. I don't know if you would add to that, Craig, or if there's anything I've gotten slightly sideways on.
Oh, no, you've covered it perfectly. I was going to add just one more thing. It's just in terms of the actual, you talk about caseworkers and MSD. Well, the processing teams within INZ are segmented into like specific areas. So, for example, if you're applying for an EWV work visa, your application will go to that team to actually process that visa. So that'll be a group of people that all work together, working on the same products. So in terms of, we sort of, the nirvana we try and aim for within immigration, or probably within government, I should say, is consistency. And it's always just a big bugbear, because people always talk about like, oh, but but and it always comes down to, it's like, as Brendon mentioned before, it is like a case-by-case example. There could be something slightly different with your application to someone else's that therefore may change the timelines or in terms of the processing around that. But generally speaking, if you're applying for a certain product, you'll be going to a group of people that's what they do. They just process those visa types. So therefore, there should be, in terms of like timeliness, they should be like within cooey of one another, all things being equal. Yeah.
I
Does
think
that mean that there can be a risk of someone being shunted from department to department?
No. Sorry, I don't quite understand this question.
if I understand it right, I think, yeah, if you apply for a particular visa, you will go to, say, for student visas, they're Palmerston North, work visas are Manukau or Christchurch, and similar sort of things. So in theory, you shouldn't necessarily be moved around in that sense. Depending on the case, as I mentioned before, for health for residency, if depending on the needs, we have got a health assessment team that specialises in it. So it's possible that multiple people may work on part of an application, but there's one immigration officer that it's allocated to for the overall decision. So if someone applies for one type of visa now and another type of visa in 2 years, their history is known and they may go to a different branch because it's a different type of visa potentially, but hopefully that shouldn't happen. I don't know if that does that cover it quite right?
Yeah, it's something that I haven't got any experience in, so I'm just kind of working off my experience of other kind of government departments and agencies and just wondering how analogous the issues can be. So yeah, thanks for that.
I think the one I'd probably add as well is just, I mean, and Craig's right, they will specialise on set visa types. So if you were in Manukau, you will be doing this type of work visa or residency visa and those types of things. So they'll specialise on the visa. The one thing in general is they will potentially, they might receive a work visa from your industry. They may then receive one from transport. They may receive one from other areas. So they certainly are as knowledgeable as they can be about each industry. But when applications are coming in, if there's a need to give, you can always give additional context if you feel it's important for an immigration officer to know. So, it may be that some of them have seen a lot from game developers, or it may be the first one that they've seen. So it's always just with any application, giving as much context as someone's reasonably happy to give. I don't know if that's fair to say, Craig.
Yes, no, that's definitely fair to say. And also just try to keep the conversation going. The teams themselves actually do have things like get-togethers, like quality circles, that type of thing, sort of thing. So when they, for example, they do see, for example, like a game development application come in, they can actually share that knowledge with the rest of their colleagues. So the idea is to spread that skill set or the knowledge base around their actual team that they work in. So yeah, while it's not a perfect sort of approach, the idea being is, yeah, so generally speaking, there is a little bit of knowledge about all the sectors within New Zealand across a team sort of thing. Yeah.
So reducing that kind of siloization risk and stuff.
100%. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, great, thank you.
One of the beautiful things about our industry is the breadth of skills that are part of game development. Screenplay producers, animation artists, programmers, etc. So, are there any plans to create a dedicated visa pathway for digital and creative technology sectors, given the unique skill mix that we have?
So if I start and see how we go with this, I think Craig and I have to be careful we don't sort of speak too far for policy, and that to our knowledge, there is not something like that currently being looked at to our knowledge, with that disclaimer, because again, some decisions on policy are made at an operational level, some are made at an MB level, and some are in fact made by the minister and cabinet of the government of the day. So different things could come through. I mean, there is some industry customization within aspects like the green list, which I think might be on one of the questions shortly as well. So there's the potential for roles and different occupations within industry to be recognised within different categories. I think there are two approaches. You can make visas by industry, or you can look at how different visas are different industries recognised within visas as well. So I know for digital nomad conditions were talked about a bit over the last couple of years, and a policy was brought in around that. What has happened with that was, rather than it becoming a standalone visa, they've actually become conditions within the current visitor visa settings. So there's one or two ways of doing it. That's an indication of what's happened policy-wise in the last, literally within this year, is that they've opted to go within that visa. But that is not to say that in future a decision might not be made, could well be made to say, actually, we do look at that for the industry. So I guess to our knowledge, we're not aware of anything currently, but that, and I suppose two things is looking within the different ones to say where they're at, but actually, there's nothing to stop. And we can always take feedback as well. If you think there's a particular case for certain things to be made, we can take that back at our level too.
And I was
Excellent.
just thinking, there's just one thing I could add to that. Oh, sorry, I've just lost my train of thought. Yeah, we could probably, in terms of like, we are at the end of this year, there is a scheduled like a review of the skills policy. So that's covering both the green list and also the skilled migrant category. And so that could be an opportunity for the industry to feed into that consultation process. At the moment, the minister is just considering options in that space in terms of the timing and the actual how the consultation process will look like. But as soon as that information comes out, we'll be able to share that with you. Yeah, but this is just like another ability to feed into the actual policy development process. So yeah, both covering the green list and also the skilled migrant category. Yeah.
Excellent. I'm going to jump to a different question than what you both might be looking at, just on that topic of the updates. Two questions. Is there any intention to update the green list with skills that could cross other industries, like producers, like technical artists? And also, how can the game development industry better engage with Immigration New Zealand to ensure that the immigration settings reflect the realities of our workforce and our talent pipeline needs, i.e., those technical skills and getting them on the green list?
I think there's probably two parts to it. One is, the review that Craig's mentioned. I think that will be a good and formal way of feeding that somewhere around the green list at the time. But in one sense, we don't also have to, should we say, wait for policy review if there's information in any stage that members or the association have that they want to share. So we're always interested in, there are things for our assessment for a couple of our visa categories, things like market rate. For salary is always of interest. So if there's data at any stage from surveys that you'd like to share with us, that would be great, because we can always take that in. And we're conscious, especially for this industry, that there are roles that job titles and roles that we may not have conceived of or known to think of a few years ago. And I mean, AI is an easy one to pick on in terms of it, but roles like that 10 years ago that related to AI we may not have conceived of or known about. So I guess we're always happy to take that feedback at any stage, because there's formal policy in terms of how the categories work, and then there's also, well, actually how are we deciding that? If you were to find there was a particular new role or something that we weren't quite getting right around how we've judged market rate, we'd always be happy to receive information, and also any questions you have of us for information to share with members, so that it's a two-way flow.
Excellent. Well, the good news on that is that we're looking to do a salary survey this year. So come the end of the year, we might be able to help you out with that data.
Excellent. Yes, please.
That'd be great. Thanks.
Well, we can only try, can't we? Just wondering what kind of information or data that would be useful for Immigration New Zealand when, assessing those updates. Obviously, you mentioned salary. Is there any other data that might be of use to Immigration New Zealand?
It is probably, anything where occupations are in particular shortage for roles that are, I mean, anything around the labour market for any of the roles is always of good interest, but it'd be salary, scarcity, potentially, and potentially any feedback you're getting around the attractiveness of New Zealand. So, if people say, well, look, there's a particular role we sometimes find in industries, it may be, for example, some roles, want a better phrase, are easy to recruit for and others are harder to recruit for. So, if you did get any feedback which said, well, actually, we find getting these roles, but there's another type over here that we make an offer, but they've already gone somewhere else. It could be anything like that as well. It just tells us You know, and it may be attractiveness around whether it's residency or other factors, but I think anything along those lines, Craig, you may have other thoughts top of mind from an operations policy perspective as well.
Yeah, I was thinking this probably more touches probably into that NZCO national occupation list space and sense of like unique roles within your industry. That obviously that's a lot of industry space. This they have roles within their sectors, but they don't actually they don't ever appear anywhere on the NZCO list at all. So like that information will be like super useful to us. But obviously with the national the NOL being created sort of thing, immigration has decided to like move away from using ANSCO and then obviously that the ANSCO traditionally was like in Australia, New Zealand standard, what was it, classifications occupation list, which is pretty much like dominated by the Australians. And so the decision's been made, or Stats New Zealand has created the national occupation list to basically have like a dedicated New Zealand occupation list for that. And so over time, you'll find that the immigration instructions will move away from the use of the ANSCO into that NOL space. But obviously one of the problem with immigration is we have about like 3 legacy computer systems that we work with, and so it's not just a reference data table change, it's quite a massive IT change. It will take a little while to do that, but eventually the instructions and our IT systems will be 100% working only in that national occupation list space. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Is Immigration New Zealand considering flexibility in visa requirements for remote or hybrid international workers that are employed by our NZ studios?
I suppose there has been a slight change around that digital nomads, although that's for people working offshore into New Zealand. I'm not aware of anything specific policy-wise which says there's some changes coming up, but I think there may be individual circumstances people can look at depending on their visa type, depending on whether they're on an open visa and what it sort of allows as well. I think we're aware of a lot more situations now where people are offshore working for New Zealand companies or onshore working for offshore companies. So probably not a direct answer. There's not immediate plans for policy change that we're aware of. So that's not to preempt that anything may or may not be looked at a higher level, but I'm not aware of anything set, Craig.
No, all I can really add is the same. Predominantly the visa options the work visa options that we offer to people are pretty much the employee or the migrant has to be like 100% like employed within New Zealand on those visas, while they will have like a multiple entry visa, which means they can pretty much like come and go as they please. The intention is that they actually have to be here like working full time, such as like 30 hours a week, that sort of thing. But there's nothing to prevent them, for example, visits to the home country, going on holiday into the Pacific Islands, something like that. That's perfectly fine. But yeah, at the moment there isn't. Yeah, the focus is really on just like the idea of the visa is to be like working, like provide you the ability to work in New Zealand all like the majority of the time that you hold the visa for. Yeah.
And I think just to revisit the digital nomad conditions that I mentioned a couple of times, that was announced, I think it was about February, that they were looking at, and digital nomad was the term that was in the media. What that effectively was under our visitor visa conditions, they can work for it's someone that is in a role that can be done remotely. So the proverbial work from Queenstown for whether it's a Silicon Valley employer or whoever it is, and they can travel around and do that work in New Zealand. That's made that clearer. On the one hand, those conditions do say they cannot be required to be at a physical place of work in New Zealand. So the idea is it's to be someone working for an offshore company in New Zealand, not to be working for a New Zealand company. The flip side of that is maybe it opens up some talent attraction opportunities. So, for some of those people, they may well be on a tour of the world, and New Zealand's one stop of many, and that's great too. But potentially, this could open up a pool of people who say, well, look, I will come and travel and work in New Zealand for my offshore company, and I'll be in the Queenstown or Marlborough or Mount Maunganui or wherever it may be. But actually, they're onshore. Most people migrate because they either fall in love with a place or with a person. If in their time in New Zealand they really enjoy it and want to stay, maybe it becomes another talent attraction opportunity.
Excellent, thank you. If anybody else has any other questions, please feel free to ask them. Welcome, Brian. We're happy to have microphones and cameras on. We're doing this as a bit of a roundtable discussion. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask those. Okay, I have one last question for you, Brendan and Craig. So touching on what you mentioned before, Brendan, how is Immigration New Zealand supporting efforts to attract top global talent to New Zealand's creative tech sector?
Okay, so there's a couple of websites I might try and share in a moment as well. So I guess there's two parts to it. In one sense, we are a regulator, so obviously a big part of us is making sure we've done the processing, but there are a couple of areas where we do look at and support. So we have, amongst other things, we have resurrected some of our social media. So Facebook is now back live and again, so we are working on more of an active social media presence coming out of the pandemic. Part of that is also around education around the immigration process, but it is around processing, promoting New Zealand. We have got Live and Work New Zealand as one of our website, which does promote the lifestyle and also some of the living on shore in New Zealand. One of the resources I'd like to try and draw people's attention to, because it's one that people aren't always aware of, and that is Skill Finder. So if I attempt to screen share, hopefully what you are seeing, and I'll remove those announcements that we mentioned earlier, if you were to Google Immigration New Zealand Skill Finder, it is a tool for employers to potentially, I believe, yeah, we have over 1 million people that have at some point engaged with us, one of our websites, one of our social media campaigns, and said, I'm interested in New Zealand. And we've tended to ask them, a little bit about them just to find out what industry and that they're interested in and what sort of skill level. So if you're an accredited employer, you can access this as long as the role is paying above the median wage, which is about, I want to say, around about $31 an hour without nailing it completely top of mind. So in terms of privacy, on one hand, we can't necessarily hand over the database, but what we can do is if you contact us and say I have a particular role, I'd like to send this type of message out to this particular clientele, we then forward that on your behalf and encourage them to get in touch. So I just mention it because it's a tool that, sometimes for finding skilled workers, you know of someone, your advertising has found someone, or you've identified someone during part of your business or traveling through the community. But actually, this is another way that we can help you find those people from overseas as well. And I haven't got Live and Work online at the moment, but there are some different resources to say what's life like in New Zealand that we're trying to sort of present that in a good way, the reality at what the settling in is like. There is a tool which I have gone blank on the name off top of mind, but I think on that Live Work website there is also one for if someone's planning their move to New Zealand, it actually is a checklist for them to work through of all the different things to think about, like can I bring the cat? If so, how do I bring the cat? How do I sign up for the dentist? If they're coming from the UK, why am I paying for the doctor now instead of the NHS and so forth? So yeah, I guess that's probably a start. But I think we while the majority of INZ is probably focused on processing, there are some things we do in the skills attraction space to maybe be aware of.
Fantastic. Thanks, Brendan. I'm pretty sure that a lot of people weren't aware of those tools, so that's fantastic. Look, I think we will wrap it up now. Thank you so much, Brendan. Thank you so much, Craig. The insights you've given us have been really, really useful. Thank you so much. And I think from an NZGDA point of view, we're happy to have the relationship we have with you, and we'll definitely be getting you those survey results, the salary survey results, when they come out later this year. Thanks everyone for joining. I will be speaking with Minter Alison Rudd-Watts next week about structuring for success. So if you'd like to join us for that, just go over to our events page and register there. Thank you so much. Ka kite anō.